So I wanted to thank everyone for coming and thank especially to Ignacio. So this is a talk with Ignacio Gatica in conjunction with his exhibition, Stones Above Diamonds. My name is Magdalyn. I'm the Director of Research and Artist Relations here at Cooper Cole in Toronto. And Cooper Cole is a commercial gallery established in 2012, and we represent Canadian and international artists as well. So we're super excited to work with Ignacio. I'll read an abbreviated bio for him just for an orientation. Ignacio works in installation, sculpture, video, and text to question systems of knowledge that configure personal experience in the urban and historical context, concerned from an analytical standpoint with the experience of urban living. Gatica's work modifies the elements that construct these socio-political spaces, merging data, materials, and theoretical frameworks to reconfigure particular views and making unexpected connections. He has exhibited internationally at spaces such as Interstate Projects in New York, Fundación Marso in Mexico City, Jeffrey Deitch in New York, the Museo del Barrio in New York also, and the Fondation Hippocrène in Paris, among others. And he currently lives and works in Brooklyn, New York, where he's joining us from today with his studio. Usually our talks run about 45 minutes, during which you can feel free to type questions in the chat. It's very loose format. If you want to take advantage of, something in particular that we're talking about. But there will also be a brief Q&A at the end. So yeah, we can get started. Welcome, Ignacio.
Thank you, Magdalyn, and thank you everyone in Cooper Cole for the invite of doing this exhibition.
Great. Your voice is a bit muffled now. I don't know why.
Can you hear me well?
It's a little muffled. Can others hear him?
Now is it better?
Yeah, that's better. That's better. Yeah.
Okay, that's yes, thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Cooper Cole, for the invitation. I'm happy about the outcome of the show, and I like how it looks, and that's what I just said. And I'm excited to be sharing it there in Toronto, and I like to spend time with the people who were able to come and see it, and interact with the piece. And well, it was very nice to see it in person, how other people react to it, and I think that was the most, for me at least, beautiful thing to see, because because of Corona and the borders and everything, we had to delay the show for almost a year, so it was somehow even more important to me to do it at this point.
Yeah.
So
it was great it was exciting to have. I mean, Ignacio was one of the first artists who was able to actually visit to install his show, so we're happy about that. And it was really great to have you here to actually put it together, and it looks amazing. So hopefully everyone can come see it if you're in Toronto or if you're traveling to Toronto. And it was so awesome to work with you. So to begin, I was wondering if you could just, it would be great to introduce your practice to people. Could you tell us a bit about how you work and sort of the main interests in your practice?
Yeah. Do you hear me well? Is it fine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my practice starts, I think, from personal experience that had somehow sparked interest in whatever subject I'm working in. But I try to highlight the word experience because I think right now there is so much work that is lacking that part, you know, the experience part.
Mm.
Somehow like art has been, or I mean the art practice in general, of course, it's always permeated by everything that is surrounding it, since like education, whatever, economy, markets, or, you know, environments that can inform the practice, but at the same time can somehow contaminate it by ways of speaking and ways of approaching. I think that's the main thing. So I try to like, at least, and when I'm saying this, I'm also saying it to myself. I think the part of the experience of the work, it's really what it informs the work. I mean, in terms of like the approach that I try to do, where certain subject I'm interested on, like it can be uh, the economy as I've been working these few years, or it can be a more abstract thing, but it's all about that, and starts, that's the start point. Yeah, I kind of like say, and I think, yeah,
So
and I
you mean,
really trust in that.
yeah. So you mean the experience of the visitor, like coming in and seeing the objects and interacting with them, because your project is an interactive project. Is that what you mean?
Well, that's part of why I did it interactive in a way. I mean, I think when I talk about experience, I talk about the experience that everybody has to kind of like start a conversation, you know, rather than just reading about that subject.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think it's somehow when I'm talking about a more like kind of like an overall like um, I'm trying to talk about the art practice in general. And I think there must be a balance between what is the experience that the person has, whoever the artist is, rather than just, you know, like the theory that the artist is reading, or whatever it's like theoretically informing the work. And I think um, the experience is like the meat, you know, like that it informs the work. And I think, I mean, that's the question, right? Like, how do I start working, or how do I like approach art practice? Is first through experience, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it made these specific shows, Stones Above Diamonds, so like rich to me, because it had so many layers of that experience.
Mm-hmm. So maybe it would be helpful, like maybe I can pull up images of the work and you can talk about it a bit. So because I think that that's really interesting in relation to what you've made. But for those who haven't seen it, I think it'll be helpful to see the actual project. So these are some installation views of the exhibition. So yeah, even if you want to maybe talk about the story of how this started, it's a really fascinating process that you went through, and I can just sort of go through the images.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I start working, or I kind of like been somehow developing this obsession with the object of the credit card, right? And I mean, it comes from different parts. I think I really like um, artwork that had currency as material, just because it's such a common object that everybody can engage with. So and you can narrate like larger um, historical context and histories, that I thought that the credit card, it was kind of like a good approach, or kind of like a step into these art uh, pieces that I like, that had been done with currency, and that inspired my work. But also, I like start using the credit card um, as an art object because of the history of banking in Chile, where because I'm Chilean, so like the history of the credit card being introduced as a technology in Chile, it's somehow folkloric because actually the actual Chilean president, there is this like mythologies on how the credit card started being used in the 80s in Chile, but he introduced the technology, the object, right? And it has been said that he betrayed his group of economists, that they were doing this kind of like transition, and that's how he started making all of his money, or a pretty big amount of money of that, and that he signed these papers without telling them and blah blah. But I mean, that's kind of like a brief context of how I think then that this type of common objects are somehow like part of our current folklore somehow, or the folklore of my generation somehow, which is a way that I see it, or a way that I kind of like think about it.
Mm-hmm. And so that's,
and yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I think that's it. That's how the interest on the object
Mm-hmm.
of the credit card, and then, well, also the credit card, it's somehow a strong object because everybody carries it, or almost everybody carries it in their wallet, and everybody has this like mnemotechnic, like this memory of what it's gonna happen when you use it. So as we talked before, when we talk in person, I think that that's where I thought it was kind of like the potential of the object itself, the real object of the credit card as a technology, as like, so yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
and then so you had in terms of your photography and like putting your images on the credit card itself, how so you were in Chile and then you were taking photographs of the boarded up banks.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So yes, thank you. So that's why that's part of it, why the credit card. And then,
mm-hmm.
So the history of the photographs started because I came back to Chile because I had to renew my visa. And this was the end of 2019, beginning of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And well, coronavirus was just like starting, like it wasn't even like nobody knew what the virus really was. So, but in Chile, in Santiago and over in Chile, there were big massive protests because, to put it in simple words, of the system that had been imposed like since 30 years, since like Pinochet regime, the economic system. So yeah, they were this somehow like very important and iconic protest that then led to, writing the new constitution and all what is happening right now down there in Chile. And it was interesting for me to be there because I got there somehow late after in October, when the protests were start happening, and with that, all the atrocities that the government and the policing and everything. And when I got there, things were still hot, and I felt somehow that the place that I left, it changed dramatically. And what it changed dramatically, it wasn't the people. The people were mad before. It was the city and the way these banking institutions were dealing with the protests, and somehow they were kind of like, they had this like communication, and they start all boarding up, right, their facades, and the city started changing. And then like within that, the identity of the city also was like in somehow a state of crisis too, because of how the landscape was changing so dramatically over this. So I thought it was interesting to, when and also because of the Trump administration, my visa approval got delayed for 2 months. So on this time, while I was there, I started photographing all these bank facades.
Mhm.
And then I started doing this kind of like a way of approaching to this new situation. And then I collected lots of those photographs, almost like 250 or 300. Then after that, after those 2 months, I come back to New York. I think this was in March, and then March 2020, and then the borders closed in New York because of coronavirus. And then all that happened after, right? First, in the beginning, all the stores, the city was completely empty. The stores are taking out the things that they had inside, all the products, and they were left completely empty. And after that, with the also the protests of George Floyd, and that's where they start boarding up here too. Right after, like I would say, like a month after I come back, these all fancy high-end luxury stores.
Mhm.
It was like pretty much the same thing that happened in Chile happened here, but with the stores. So, and that's what the experience part comes, and that's like kind of like this synchronicity. But I think the word is like resonance of these two different situations. It's like they were resonating each other. Like the protests were resonating, but also the ways of like being against protests were resonating. So this kind of like resonance, telepathic resonance or something. I was so shook by it, and I started photographing all these stores too. And I think that impression that led all these changes in Chile and in New York too, and a lot of people were somehow shocked by it and photographing how this happening. So that's when the credit card comes back again, because after doing this archive of 350 photographs, I wanted to know what I could do with them, because it started as an exercise, but then I wanted to do something with them, something that I felt that it was appropriate for me to do with them. And then the credit card comes back again, and I think it comes back again because there is something in the credit card that also like represents, or actually not, it gives access, right, to certain type of whatever. It's somehow like a pass. So the way that these institutions were board up, it's the opposite. So I wanted to create this in this work. I wanted to create this access to something with the card. So that's why I start encrypting the magnetic strip of the cards, and I use text to approach that problem of access that I was feeling. And in all this, in the process of this exhibition, I worked with, and I was talking with so many friends that helped me figured out what to do and what it was also making sense for them to hear. It was somehow like a collaborative thing. So I really like the social aspect of the installation, that you can like take the card, swipe it, see a text, and that's the real sculpture, you know, that's the real sculptoric as like process. It's like all that immaterial thing is the sculpture. And I really like to think it as almost like a dance in the room, or something that it has its own body, but it's ethereal. Like it's as abstract as our money right now, but it solidifies in a poetic phrase.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so I actually didn't realize, so it's really interesting that you were talking about the banks being boarded up and then the stores in New York being boarded up, and they were both sort of in order to protect the property in the face of protesters. So in Chile, it was because the subway fare had been raised. And in New York and the States at large, it was over the George Floyd protests. And so you saw this as a kind of metaphor for, because I know your work in general also thinks about the parallels between Chilean and American economic systems. And so did you see this as sort of a metaphor for neoliberalism? Is that sort of the crux of the resonance that you saw?
No, I don't see like I don't see any
No.
metaphor. No, it wasn't a metaphor. It was more happening. Like it was something pretty like what I think it's the poetic object. That's what I think, and that's what I think it is. It's there is less metaphor than actually the emancipation of an object or something.
So
The emancipatory.
sorry.
Yeah, I don't. I. Oh, I don't think that there is a metaphor in the board up. I think it's very. Yeah, I think it's straight up clear.
Right. And so in the for those who haven't seen it, the text that, so you can pick up the cards so that have Ignacio's photographs on them, the credit cards, and swipe them, and then this text, different texts associated to the different cards. And so, and this text was taken from this, like the walls, the sites of the buildings you see in the credit cards, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's I was in Chile, and then I mean it was incredible what was happening in terms of the protest, but also the kind of like anonymous voice that was rising in these wall texts that people were doing. And I remember so well the first one that I caught my attention. It said oppressive. This is in English. It was teorema opresor, oppressive theorem. And I wrote that down. And then after I left, I kept in communication with a friend, and he started collecting for me also more phrases. So after that, we made an archive of those phrases, and we kept these photographs. I have also the photographs of them, and I wanted to. I mean, it was pretty hard for me to know what to write on the text on the cards in the beginning. You know, I was like, oh, maybe, you know, like maybe something from a book excerpts, blah blah blah. Like, what's the soundbite of it? But then this idea of bringing back into the realm of the screen, this translation of these anonymous writings that are perfect, you know, but you take them out of context, and you take them in the context of the coldness of the screen, the one that we always that we're staring at right now, that also we stare our money, you know, like we know the numbers on our bank accounts through them. So it was trying to intercept that realm of the screen with this message, and I think that's that kind of like interception within these two different realms, that the one of the phrase in the world being pretty materic, right? Because it's like an action that is pretty like strong to write something on the wall, almost primitive, bring it into the realm of this digital sphere where everything's so quick and fast and like cold, and we experience that right now.
Yeah, and so it was like when you were making the work, you right off the bat had the sort of foresight to record this text, or was there, you know, were you photographing first and then you thought, actually, this is a really important aspect to bring, you know, this, I guess the sentiments or the feelings of locals into this conversation that sort of wouldn't otherwise have been captured, you know, by governing systems or economic systems.
Yeah.
Was it something you did right off the bat?
No, it was something that it came out after talking to actually some friends in Chile. These friends that have this project space called Sagrada Mercancía, and we were talking and revisiting ideas, and they said like, I have text, like, what do you guys think? And they were like, that's a great idea. And I was like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had some other ideas that weren't that good, and I think this one's good. But yeah, that's what I mean by, that's what I said before on, like, it was kind of like even talking with you, Magdalyn, in the beginning, it helped me a lot, because I also asked you, I remember asking you like about the text, what do you thought about this ideas we talk about. So it was there's this beautiful collaborative aspect I learned in this making of this exhibition that informed it and like shaped it. But in the beginning, I didn't have idea. It was the photograph thing. I didn't even knew I would use it. I was like, I'm just want to save it, but then just happened. I used it.
Yeah. And I mean, it ended up being important to the project as well, because you saw it as I remember you describing the, you know, even just the gesture of the swipe, you've like there's a subversion of the original, you know, intent of that gesture, and you wanted it to feel emancipatory, you know,
Totally.
and so I guess I'm wondering, like, is it emancipatory in the sense of are being entangled in sort of these economic systems, or is it emancipatory for these voices, or is it sort of both at the same time?
Oh, what I think it's the emancipatory part. It's the as you said, like this somehow entanglement of being with these systems, right? That they require us to always have an action towards them. So I thought the swiping the card and delivering a message, a text, a phrase,
Mm-hmm.
that it was poetic instead of an access to just your bank account or your debt or whatever. That was the emancipatory part. Mm-hmm. And that's where the art started happening for me, the art part.
And oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Was there a reason?
Yeah.
Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No.
Okay. I was wondering if there, because a few people actually who have visited the exhibition had asked, is there a reason why you, so when you swipe the card, the text comes up, but then the previous text associated with the previous card, it remains visible. So it's just like this, the text is saved and sort of moves up rather than it being replaced by the next
Oh yeah.
bit of language.
Well, that's cool that you asked, because that's kind of like going deep into the idea of this like text that is, well, I like the participatory aspect of writing a text, like everyone's writing a text, or everyone's being part of this collective action of writing instead of just the author, because these texts are from anonymous people. So then it becomes this collective thing, and I like that kind of like a way of approaching somehow poetry making or something. If I'm being very generous with me, but I like it as a cut and chop and type of approach, digital type of approach to poetry making, being very generous about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's generous, but it's also accurate. I think, because there are different definitions and types of
yeah, but that's like, game, and I'm obsessed with that. I like that.
Yeah, and a lot of time, like I guess I also think of poetry as truth, right? Like a kind of truth, in a different form.
Yeah, that's true. Like, it's the excess of words, the excess of language, kind of like lapidating all of the other bullshit or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, isn't this the ultimate truth in some ways, right? Like it's and I feel like I haven't been to Chile, to Santiago, but in Athens it's like that a lot too. Like there's a lot, like you can really, I think, tap into what young people are thinking by paying close attention to what's written on walls and sometimes even on like the embassy fences and things like that. You can actually garner a lot of that, and it's not easily accessible unless you're actually physically there. You won't really get it by reading the news. And so that's why I feel like this is, there's a very grounded kind of truth to the text aspect of this work.
Yeah, and also there is a big history of poetry in Chile, and it's so funny because I just remember a month ago I talked to an Argentinian friend, and this is a conversation that you always have with people that are from either Argentina or Brazil, like, and looking at the art scene in Chile, or the art or how art is visual art, it's appreciated in Chile. And we're talking, and we got into the conclusion that it's like the main difference, of like being an artist in Chile than being an artist in Brazil or being an artist in Argentina is that, this is an example. For example, in Brazil, if you don't know who Hélio Oiticica is, then you are like, you don't know anything. And in Chile, if you don't know who Nicanor Parra is, well, then the poet, then you're not anyone. But if you don't know like who X artist is in Chile, it's normal. Nobody knows,
Mm-hmm.
Visual artists. So poetry in Chile is somehow bigger than our visual art.
Interesting. Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask too, because this isn't sort of the first time that your work has considered the parallels between or like maybe not parallels, but relationship between Chile and America. And the reason for that is because of the sort of history of America introducing neoliberalism to Chile. And I remember you saying that your work is very much, you know, existing in the aftermath of that. I was wondering if you could talk about that, because I felt like it really helped me to understand a different facet of your practice and what the reasoning between bringing Chile and America into conversation is, which you do in this work.
Yeah, that's the folklore part. It's the how the kind of all the aspect of culturally like Chile shaped in the late 30 years. But well, okay, so in the 70s, right? Salvador Allende project was and government was overthrown by Pinochet, but it's in the context of Condor, right? Context of Cold War. CIA backed this coup against Allende and puts Pinochet in power. Mm-hmm. At the same time, a group of economists were being paid by the CIA to go study in Chicago University economics, and they were taught by Milton Friedman under Friedrich Hayek ideas on this new project, right? Neoliberalism, and how that in Milton Friedman mind, it's somehow this like geniality that will like fix everything. And these people become, you know, because Milton Friedman is so, it was such an excellent and kind of like attractive, you know, like spokesperson, almost like a guru, economic gurus. They become, this group of economists, they become 100% in love with this idea of this new model, and they wanted to bring it back to Chile. And they brought it back before, but it didn't work. But then right after when Pinochet got in power, they present him this project as a book, you know, they present him El Ladrillo, a book that they made. And they asked him to impose it. And Pinochet is fascinated with it and says, of course, you know, this comes from America, of course, like this is a good idea. And in the context of Cold War, this what is better than this? You know, like what is better than this kind of like technology that these people are bringing? You know, ideological technology, and that's how it started developing. And you know, like one of the natures of neoliberalism is that it's the speed, how quick everything is, you know, and the kind of like how the speed, how it increased over time. So I mean, right after a few years, it was started happening, all the development and everything, and the city changed completely, and everything could change completely. Like, I mean, the experience of my grandfather versus the experience of my experience, they're both almost like dislocated by this. So I think that's the dislocation I refer to when I talk about the folklore of it.
Mm-hmm. And then yeah, that's super helpful and really interesting. Like I you know, in terms of also understanding the link between the credit card, I think also, and sort of, you know, your use of the credit card for the images of Chile as well as the States.
Because the person who brought the credit cards to Chile was also a Chicago boy.
Interesting. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It was also a Chicago thing.
Very he's on top news now because
What?
he's like on the news right now because he got well caught doing what he's best at.
Got it. So I guess one question I wanted to ask you before I'm going to stop sharing my screen and maybe start opening it up to other questions is what is the role of language in your work? Is it something like, how do you see language in your greater practice? Is this something that because I'm not sure if because I know you've done work with credit cards before at Interstate Projects. You included a different project with credit cards. But yeah, what does language mean to you in your practice or generally?
Yeah. I think I find interesting like language against image, and then I find interesting, of course, kind of like the linguistic aspect of the object and text. But I like to think that yeah, I like to think that I like to think that kind of like I like to think the structural aspect of text and language in practice.
Cool, that's a great answer. Yeah, I noticed that there was one question that maybe it's like I can start reading them as well. I have more questions, but I'm gonna start mixing it up. So Nicole says, hi, I wanted to ask about the language of the text. So what are the implications of translating originally Spanish words into English? And how is that process? What was lost in translation? For instance, one of the graffiti of the credit cards references Neruda's famous verse while giving it political ironic twist. If you were to show this project in Santiago, would you use Spanish? This is a good question.
Yeah, if I will present this work in Santiago that I'm planning to, I'm gonna use Spanish. And there's always like a lot lost in translation, but there's always something that is being translated all the time. I mean, we all translate everything. So we try to get the most of it. And there is words that you can't translate, and that's beautiful too, you know. They have no translation. And those ones are fantastic. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to translate. Interesting.
Do you think that there was anything lost in translation with certain? I mean, I'm sure there were, but were there any instances that you thought were particularly tricky?
I mean, well, I mean that everything. I mean, it's like I understand where the question comes from, or I think I understand where the question comes from, and I think that we translate everything that we see, that we hear, we translate it. We pass it through our own filter, right, of the body, and then we put it back. So it's like whatever you're doing, a documentary, a film, you're creating reality rather than just like saying this is real, right? And the consonance between that is outside and the reality that you're creating, that's well when you can kind of like say, oh, it does kind of like it's tuned or in tune by it, or which purpose, but yeah, I mean, both languages are okay.
So you would sorry.
I think
sorry, you're just breaking up. So if you were translating something, let's say, so you're not doing like a literal translation, you're doing, you're also taking into account your cultural understanding as well, right? And making sure it has
for example, there is some sayings that people wrote and I put them in the card. I mean, just taking out of context something, it's just somehow a way of translating, but again, like there is some certain sayings that in Spanish they mean this thing, and then in English they're completely different saying. So I had to do, for English, I had to do it in English, you know, and that's not literal. And I mean, that's not like copy and paste or whatever, but
yeah. No, that's super interesting. I guess I always wonder that because there are people of different minds that say that you're supposed to sort of translate literally, but I feel like I'm more of the mind of just like, you have to translate the meaning more than you have to translate the words themselves.
But then like a haiku, for example, like people translating Japanese haikus, and it's like, is there meaning to a haiku too? How do you translate that? It's like, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting subject for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess it's, what is meaning? Is it like the message, or is it, sometimes meaning could be feeling, you know? So maybe
exactly. And coming back to the first kind of like subject or topic that we were saying, like meaning, it's also or for me, it's the experience, right? The experience brings meaning more than just theory. Theory informs experience, but at the end, the experience is like overall the gold standard of being alive.
Yeah, there's nice resonance. I mean, maybe I'm stretching too far, but I feel like there is a resonance also in the idea of, you know, so you have the aspect where you're translating language, and then there's the aspect that you're translating gesture in the work, you know, like the swiping gesture and being able to decontextualize it in order to sort of think of it differently, or, you know, and I think I wrote it in my note to you too, is like, I remember hearing David Harvey speak about how even our everyday gestures have been neoliberalized now, right? Like the expectation of our social interactions is sort of all built around neoliberalism now, in ways that we don't really feel or see. And I do think of that sort of swipe gesture as part of it. I mean, even though we're like tapping now and stuff like that, but it's just the sort of that process is something that's sort of been neutralized, even though it's attached to you know, ways of controlling people through finance.
Yeah, that's why I think like a good example of that physical emancipation is dancing, because there is, I mean, dancing, really dancing, like it's like moving your body in a way that you haven't done it the whole week, and you know, you just like, you don't have any plans to just dance, and this was, I mean, yeah, as type of gesture. Then the dance of the swipe, right? This gesture of the swipe has this somehow sensuality too, that when that I think I wanted to take advantage of.
Yeah. And So I also wanted to ask before, because it's like 1 now, and I also want to ask before we sign off is about the video work in the exhibition, which is really beautiful, and it's a sort of separate but adjacent to this credit card project where you filmed the I guess mostly on Madison Avenue in New York, the stores that were abandoned during COVID and the George Floyd protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, and it's really beautiful visually, and also very eerie in terms of seeing these like very expensive stores with like a lot of like fancy fixtures like marbles and things like this, and they're completely empty, and there's plants that are dying, and the sort of orchids losing their leaves and everything from abandonment. Yeah, could you talk to us a bit about like what made you think to add that aspect, and how did it work? I mean, those stores were obviously not boarded up then, or were they?
Yeah, that was before that they were boarded up, and all of the objects were like taken down, and the stores weren't open for probably like 3 weeks, and the plants start dying. And I was doing actually the photographs on the street, or trying to photograph some boarded up stores, and then me and my friend Riley Hooker, we found all these crazy stores, and Riley was like, "Look, this is insane! Like, look at this! Like, it's so crazy." I was like, "Shit! I have to come back and record it." So I did that with my friend Matthew and Adriana Gagliano, that is an amazing photographer, and they both filmed me. And Matty is like a great kind of like cinematographer to producer, so they helped me making the video happen. And we record all like in like few weeks, like all of this, and we have so much footage which I just used like little, but I used the ones that were more significant to me.
Yeah, because it's like 8 minutes in the end, like a lot more than that.
Yeah, now wait.
I guess I'll put it out there if anyone has any other questions. Now is the time, because I think yeah, usually we're like about an hour. So, but while I'm like waiting, I guess or maybe Asa wants to ask a question.
Hi, how's it going? Yes, I just wanted to say that was such a fantastic show at Cooper Cole, and I feel I haven't been like that excited about work in a long time. So that's something I feel like I've already shared with you, Ignacio, but I just want to reiterate. I feel like I have a lot to say, but I do have a question. There's, for me, there's multiple factors that were really exciting about the show. And one of it was sort of this, like, I'd been meditating on this sentence that I came across. And it was also really interesting hearing you, Magdalyn and Ignacio, talking about like word as truth. And I stumbled across a sentence which was, all words are lies. And so I had recently been meditating with that thought. And then when I walked into your installation and being able to interact with it and kind of creating this like poetic, ongoing, like almost this like concrete poetry that was happening. And for me, like a lot of the slippage that was happening within the work is thinking about while meditating on those thoughts, and then um, seeing and also thinking about like the abstraction of words as well as abstraction of language and also commerce, and just money, how that's just such like an abstract
Thank you so much.
it's sort of engagement. Yeah, I was really intrigued with that, and then I found that like also looking at the video, it felt very like timely and like dystopic. Um, but I'm wondering, I'm also just really intrigued on like how um, you know, there was a conversation of like your relationship to language, but also your relationship and kind of, I don't know, like if you picture like the future of like currency and commerce and like all these like places that you're documenting, but also like experiencing in the now, like are you like thinking about the future? And yeah, so anyways, it makes me think a lot about those things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question of the future, I feel like the question that it's having, like, it's kind of like the responsibility that as a generation, right, we're experiencing. And I think, I mean, okay, so I think um, like decentralization, it's becoming somehow a canvas for this like new landscape in terms of finance. And I think, I mean, currencies are becoming more and more abstract. And with that, the experience of the world will become more and more abstract. And then, I mean, then the affection and our bodies are being abstracted by these technologies. And I hope that we can still gather in real life in the future. And I think that's what I've been appreciating more lately, to just, even in the opening, just to see people to have met you in your opening, and like go through the space and this amazing architecture you did for your show. But that experience of my body going through it was very important. And I hope the future has more of that, and we can use those other like tools of abstraction yet. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, I personally, I don't want to bring down like anyone thinking about the future, but I think it's in terms of like the economic thing. I mean, in terms of emotional and friendships, and I think that's the most important thing at the end, is like how we engage with our otherness and our friends and the people. I mean, that's how we survive in a good way to this kind of like dystopic future that is being presented to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great questions, musings. I was wondering, well, I don't have any questions in the chat, but I guess I maybe ask one more question, which was sort of about, I mean, it's going back to you just went so broad and thinking about the future, and I'm going to go narrow again, which was to think about how the credit card object, like how it related to previous work and how it maybe evolved in this project, because I didn't see your show at Interstate, but I noticed that they were white, the cards, so there was a different aesthetic to them. So yeah. I was wondering if you could just talk about that, how they maybe have evolved in your practice as well?
Yeah, I think, well, it's like the layer of the image in the credit card. It in this particular installation narrates, right, a context and something that happened, right, that is related to this inaccessibility. So then the card becomes important as an object to try to like break up this in this work, to get the access happen in another way. So mhm.